Okay, I think we're live. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا نبينا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. A very, very warm welcome to today's live stream. Alhamdulillah, I have been able and blessed to gather some absolute legends. Alhamdulillah. These are brothers that I have known for a long time. I have seen their journey from even pre-university, being involved in the community with dawah work at university even and beyond. They're all, mashallah, managed to climb the corporate ladder whilst maintaining the very important Muslim identity, ethical values, and overall, alhamdulillah, all of them are still involved in a lot of work. And the question is, how do they manage to do it? And what can we learn from their journeys? In particular, today's topic is around navigating the murky waters of office politics. Even someone like myself, who only spent a short while in the corporate, in the corporate life, even I experienced as an intern very, very unfair treatment. I experienced some power struggles in certain teams. So I can only imagine what uh, the average person goes through in a 10, 15, 20-year career, subhanAllah. Now, this is something that we must learn how to deal with. So I've brought the best people that I could think of. Yeah, and alhamdulillah, this stream is brought to you by Wiselife Academy. They've helped in making this stream possible today. So with me, I have Brother Qasim, who is a director at ENY, mashallah. I have Brother Imran Khan, who studied with me at the LSE and then went on to joining EY and is now a senior risk manager at the London Stock Exchange. We also have another LSE legend, Brother Safeguarder, who did quite a long stint after university at ENY and moved over to Amazon. And alhamdulillah, he's been there ever since. And all three brothers, mashallah, are climbing the ladder and paving the way for young Muslims, young Muslim professionals to follow suit. So I am going to stop talking now because we need to hear from our guests. And the first question I would like to ask, and I'm going to start with Brother Saif, inshallah. What has your journey been like, climbing the corporate ladder, going through EY and then Amazon and getting to a pretty senior position as a practicing Muslim? Can you tell us a little bit about what that journey has been like for you?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Well, first of all, Tanim, I just wanted to thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I don't really typically do this stuff, but I just thought, I can't turn down an invite from yourself. So it's a real pleasure and honor being here with all of you. The question that you ask is a really good one, Tanim. So maybe I'll just go through a bit about my journey, perhaps starting with after graduation. So I graduated back in 2009, and alhamdulillah, I was able to secure a graduate role at EY. I did a good sort of 3.5 years at EY in the audit practice, so effectively auditing large listed clients, mainly in the TMT space, so technology, media, telecom space. And alhamdulillah, after 3.5 years, I got a bit bored, if I'm honest, right? And I was looking for a change. And at that point, an opportunity came up in the financial accounting advisory services, also part of EY. But it's a department where, you're sort of advising clients on how to, apply correct accounting standards, how to sort of deal with gap conversions, and so forth. So again, I did that for about 1.5 years, and I got to a managerial position as part of that role. But then again, I got a bit bored, right? And I'll talk a bit more about this in a bit, right? And at that point, I remember one night I was in sort of working away at a client site in Reading, and at that point, a call from a recruiter came, and they were interested to hire me for Amazon. And I was like, okay, well, sounds like an interesting learning opportunity. Let me try it out. And alhamdulillah, I've been at Amazon since then, so it's been nearly 9 years now, and I've done quite a few different roles. Initially, I joined in a role that looked after what we call vendor rebates. So that's one of the things I realized after joining Amazon, that it operates at such a vast scale that people are doing very, very specialized roles. So this was one of those specialized roles where you're looking after the financial reporting on just the rebates that we get from vendors, and that alone was over 2 billion, right? So that sort of gives you an idea about the scale that Amazon operates in, like where the vendor rebates themselves are 2 billion, right, per annum. And then after doing that, I switched to another role, which was again you could say a high impact individual contributor role that was focused on M&A, so effectively mergers and acquisitions. So wherever Amazon goes out and buys another subsidiary or another company, that it goes through a huge amount of financial integration, and I managed that for a project in the Middle East, and I was part of the launch of the website, Amazon websites in those regions. So that was a really exciting role, working directly with the business to launch these websites. And then in my current role, I look after a team. So I basically transitioned from an individual contributor role to a team manager role, and I look after a team of about 10 people. Again, primarily focused on the financial reporting for acquired subsidiaries, but also supporting various business launches in the emerging markets, mainly, the MENA region, Turkey, and South Africa, right? So that's a bit of a brief, quick sort of walkthrough about my journey. Now, in terms of your question, Tanim, going back to that, like how did I, how did I find it, right? I think, yeah, it's a very broad question, and I don't want to take up the whole conversation. I'm sure the others are going to pitch in, but for me, the key thing was I think a lot of folks are perhaps focused on promotions, right? So getting to the next level, right? And that's great. That gives you that inner ambition, inner drive to sort of keep performing and keep raising the bar and so forth. But for me, if I'm honest, the primary motivation was learning, right? And I mentioned a few times that I became bored, and I was always looking for learning opportunities, right? So it was more of like, instead of career opportunities, it was like learning opportunities, right? And alhamdulillah, because I sort of applied that mindset, everything else sort of came as an externality, right? So, if like I was quite proactive in raising my hand, taking up new challenges, and that helped me step out of my comfort zone. That allowed a lot of personal growth, and eventually, yeah, the promotions and as you termed it, climbing the ladder, those sort of came in time, right? Because if you sort of keep proving yourself, consistently performing, and perhaps navigating some of the politics, which we'll get into later,
Mhm.
some of these things will come automatically, right? And obviously a lot of it is Allah's will. We can't sort of attribute the success to ourselves, right? But alhamdulillah, that's how I found it. Now, in terms of as a practicing Muslim, alhamdulillah, I was able to sort of maintain sort of the values and I guess my identity at work, and we can go into the details more. But in the beginning, it was challenging, if I'm honest. But I think EY sort of gave me that grounding. And even before that, like university gave me that grounding, right? So I was already going into the workforce with a certain mindset, values, and I wanted to keep hold of that. And then EY had the perfect sort of setup. Like there was a Muslim network, which I really wanted to be part of, and I was part of it, alhamdulillah. And that sort of allowed me to sort of transition from uni to work, which is quite difficult for a lot of folks, but that sort of foundation was there to help me. Amazon, we don't really have something like that. It's sort of starting at the moment. But it felt like because I had the foundation, I was able to sort of carry that across into Amazon. So if I'm honest, it wasn't a huge challenge for me, but yeah, there were certain, points in time where I had to navigate through some ambiguous situations, and I'm sort of happy to talk about it later on. But yeah, hope that answers your question at a high level.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. And phenomenal gem there in terms of being proactive and focusing on learning, and that alone it can be transformational to someone's career. Alhamdulillah. Fantastic. I would like to ask the same question to Brother Qasim, who, mashallah, is at a director level. I remember when I first joined Deloitte as a 17-year-old on a gap year scheme, I used to look at my director and be like, man, 12 years and I want to be there. I want to make that 125K and I just can't wait. And subhanAllah, now, and there were no Muslims in those roles back in those days, and mashallah, it fills my heart to see good brothers taking up those roles and inshallah progressing beyond, inshallah. How has your journey been? Have you been at EY since, I believe you have been at EY as a graduate,
Yeah.
and so you've basically gone through all of the stages. Alhamdulillah, how has that journey been for you?
So Alhamdulillah, it started a bit rough because so I
Okay.
graduated from university in 2013. So June 2013, I graduate university. I want to help the world. I want to help the ummah. I want to change things. But then quickly I realized, even though I have an economics degree from the University of Cambridge, that means very little in the professional world. um,
Really?
it's all about experience, right? So if you really want to make a difference, and over the years I've learned that you can make a difference, and we'll probably come on to it as we talk later. But they were all asking about, what experience do you have? What experience do you have? So all I had was my university degrees, and I did not know what I wanted to do. So I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a positive impact on the community. Um, so after graduation, didn't have anything lined up. Got to September, October of 2013, still didn't have anything. Then got to January, February time of 2014, and my dad's like, "You need to get out of the house now. You need to do something with your life. Go do it." And my brother was at EY at that time actually, and he said to me, he goes, "Look, do 3 years, do a graduate scheme, you get a professional qualification, you get work experience, you get EY on your CV, you become a professional, you become a chartered accountant. So after 3 years, even if you hate it, you can leave and the world is your oyster." But the main thing he said is the people. He goes, "Look, he's there and he can vouch for the people in terms of it's a place that you feel comfortable in." And that was true to a degree. But anyway, so I applied to the tax team in Feb 2014, and alhamdulillah got a role for April 2014. So I started my career then in April 2014, and I've been there since. So 10-year anniversary last month. So I got £20 gift voucher and 2 days extra annual leave for 10 years of service. But we won't go on about that. Um, so since then, as you mentioned, Tanim, I've been with EY for the last 10 years. So did my graduate scheme, made it to manager in 1.5 years, and then 2 years to senior manager, and then two years to, I can't remember now, master, we're adding up, yeah, and then 2 years to director. So alhamdulillah, I made it to director in 9.5 years in total. And the journey was not easy because as we know, back in the day, 10 years ago, the landscape was very different. In terms of being a present Muslim, it was you didn't see many, around you. So myself, Saif, Imran, we probably see each other in the prayer room, but the kind of presence of of Muslims in that field was very limited, and equally senior Muslims being present in the office limited, if at all. So in terms of those role models and in terms of those aspirational Muslim role models you could look to, you just didn't have. And I remember one of the graduates in another service line in assurance in audit. He came to me. So I think this was in my first or second year. He was a new joiner, and he came to me and he said there was a presentation taking place in one of their kind of town halls, they call them, and there was an individual with a very Muslim name, a senior partner, a very Muslim name. So that he was, subhanallah, like here's a Muslim partner standing up. And the first words out of this individual's mouth was, sorry if I seem a bit out of it. I had too much tequila last night. So when he said this, he came to me and he said, I don't think I belong here because when you look around you and you see the situation, do I have to give up my Islamic identity Do I have to give up being a Muslim? Can I not pray here? Do I have to, drink to be able to progress? And I even remember after I qualified and became qualified chartered accountant, a lot of my friends were also on graduate schemes, so they had qualified respectively in their respective firms, and a lot of them are moving on to different roles, in industry, in-house roles, because their challenge to me was, why are you staying at EY when to progress and to become more senior, you will have to go drinking, you'll have to do networking, and inevitably this is how it happens. But alhamdulillah, as that journey progressed, you realize that it's not the case. And it was tough at the beginning because that was all they did. Drinking was the only way they communicated. And so if you're not involved in those circles, the feedback I got in my first year, so imagine, first year graduate in a role, never worked in this environment before. I didn't even do internships or anything like that. I was too busy playing Call of Duty. But so you're in this environment, you've done your first year, and the feedback that I got from my counselor, who was, he was a director at the time himself, he said to me, no one knows you in the team. You're okay, but you've got no profile. So and if you've got no profile, then how are you going to pick up work? Because again, back then it was 5 days a week in the office. So how am I supposed to pick up work if no one knows who I am? If I'm not going, drinking with these individuals, with the senior partners, building that rapport. So that hit me really hard. So then, building on from that, there was a challenge. How do I build my presence as a Muslim in this team without compromising my deen? And there was various ways, and we'll come on to that later, but just a few examples, because conscious of time. Being present in the office. So there was a hot desking system. So rather than sitting next to my friends, I used to sit next to different senior people in the team to build rapport with them. And they used to network from 5 to 9, in the pub or wherever they might be. I used to network from 9 to 5. So I used to be in the office networking, and people always used to say, you talk a lot. But for me, that was when I did my networking. I did my work after hours. Alhamdulillah, back then I lived at home, single, no responsibilities. Mumsy had everything on lock, laundry, food, everything. So I could spend more time building that foundation, building that career. And then, I organized football. Again, football is universal. Senior partners were playing football with us, so I got to build that relationship with them on the field. They used to go drinking afterwards. I used to excuse myself and go home. Pretend I still had curfew. That got a few chuckles. But equally, then organizing a table tennis tournament again seems very trivial at this time, but this meant that you can, obviously, table tennis sports are universal, so you'd have senior partners involved, senior people in the team, and they get to know you, right? Because you're emailing them, say, you've got a match to play, can you please play it? Which is really odd for a very junior individual to be emailing a partner of 20 years to say, go play your table tennis match, bro. So there was ways around, and alhamdulillah, the landscape has changed significantly. The landscape is very different. So the socializing, the element, they're very cognizant. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matters was a catalyst to bringing the conversation out in the open about what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with. So now whenever they organize team socials, there's always an event. So they go ice skating, they go axe throwing, they go bowling, and so on and so forth. And then whoever wants to go afterwards, they do their thing, but there's after. So then the new Muslims that enter the team, and whenever we go on team events or team socials, is always halal. It's always halal restaurants because they know I only eat halal. So there's that element of it means that alhamdulillah, as we progress now, there is a platform for us to then build upon to be our authentic selves. And yes, there is a caveat to that to some degree, and we can touch base on that later on in the conversation. But the journey is not always an easy one, but keeping true to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Sunnah of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that's always where success lies. And equally, lean on those that have come before you. There's no reason to struggle beyond. If the ladder is being pulled down behind them, climb that ladder, no problem. Climb up behind them. So always lean on those around you. We're having this session now, for example. All of these things, leverage them as far as possible. I appreciate I've taken more time than Tanim, but
No, I really appreciate hearing that story because, subhanAllah, there are challenges along the way. And yes, the landscape was very different a decade ago. do you think it's easier now then to bring your full authentic self, or do you still have to be quite tactical and strategic about, the football and the sport thing was a fantastic gem, by the way, because yes, that is something everybody unites on. But do you think today, if you were a graduate this year, would it be much easier for you to go through the ranks?
Yeah, there's two parts to that. One is yes, because there's people around now. There's mentors who can give you, because a lot of it is about playing the game, knowing
Yeah.
how the processes work. When they have these year-end, so this week we had lots of year-end review panels. So I lead the review panels for the business apprentices across London and Birmingham for the tax team. So leading those discussions, understanding what they're looking for, what are the key metrics, what boxes do you need to tick. In a lot of instances, you see it's a tick box exercise. You tick the right boxes, you're there. And how to be able to, and it's not a case you prepare a week or two in advance. Having those conversations to say, okay, here is where I am at. Where do I want to be in 12 months? How do I get there? What do I need to do? So having that understanding of the processes and how it works, and equally, a lot of the interviews that we do, I'll be the one interviewing people to come into the team. So you understand and you know what the team are looking for. So leaning on these individuals who have that insight is critical. It's insider information, right? It's not, and people talk to me about nepotism and stuff. Well, hang on a minute. If the information is available and the data is available to you, you take advantage of the resources you have to hand. But the slight caveat to your question around bringing your true authentic self, Tanim, there are challenges to that, and maybe we can cover them late in more detail. But the situation in Gaza at the moment with the conflict, how vocal you can be around this, we know that there's limits to the concept of bring your true authentic self to work. That's what EY put forward, but as we see in recent months, there's a limit to their mantras, right? So and again, being very cognizant of that. So you can play the game very well, and you can still bring a lot of your true authentic self in a professional capacity, but you have to be cognizant of the wider implications.
Mashallah. I really appreciate that and look forward into digging a little bit more into some of these topics. I'd like to now come to Brother Imran, who also started his career at EY after graduating from the LSE with an economics degree as well, mashallah. I remember ferociously copying all of your notes because I was on the same program as well, but 2 years behind. Alhamdulillah. I'd like to ask you a twofold question. One is, briefly, how have you found your journey going from literally a graduate at EY to a senior manager now? And can you give us a bit of a taster of your biggest challenge, most painful challenge so far when it comes to the topic of office politics?
Okay, cool. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So alhamdulillah, yeah, Tanim, again, it's awesome to be on this podcast with you, just being able to share some experience. Inshallah, there's benefit, and also it's an interesting trip down memory lane. Like you mentioned, uni and all my dodgy notes. I don't quite remember how helpful those were. And then yeah, sort of coming across sort of both Saif and Qasim at work, and sort of where we've gone since. So for me, I guess in a nutshell, my kind of approach was. I remember sort of after completing my A levels, if I start there, or even choosing them, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do, as most like 16, 17-year-olds are. Someone seemed to say I had a good head for numbers and whatnot, so I picked economics as one of my subjects. I remember though I really had an interest in wanting to help people. So I thought, yeah, like medicine seems like a good route. And then my biology teacher told me that I just wasn't cut out for it. So that kind of shut down that dream quite sadly and abruptly. But then so I found myself just almost sort of on a game sort of thing. So did sort of numerical based A levels, went to a uni that sort of specialized, like London School of Economics. Off the back of that, then I started a graduate, which in my second year, I applied for internships, and then I got. I remember it was a funny one actually, because I remember, and at the LSE, there's a huge contingent of people that will apply for like your investment banking roles and all this other stuff. And I remember like loads of my friends were getting like rejections, and I was just thinking, a I don't know, like if I want to put myself through that, like mentally. Uh, I know, like everyone say that's where the money lies, and like right off the bat, straight after uni. But it was just, what did I want for myself, right? And I didn't really fully know, but I did know what I didn't want, and I didn't want to like um, work myself to the ground in a way that, like right off the bat, I have. By the way, I'm not unfamiliar with like working into the long hours, particularly in the early stage of my career. But like I knew what I didn't want to do, so I purposely didn't apply for any of the investment banks, and uh, I kind of, it was more sort of managing my own self expectations there. I didn't want to like open myself up to like disappointment right at the beginning of my career. I thought, look, if I go there, and I did a year in an investment bank, and I thought, if I do it, we can see later down the line. But I was all about sort of building myself up organically. So my degree sort of lent itself to, someone said, why don't you do like a, similar to Qasim, I said like a graduate scheme at one of these professional services firms will open you up to like a professional qualification, and you don't have to choose what you want to do. That always is a selling point for me. Like I don't have to choose what I'm going to do. So it's almost like you gain a qualification you choose what to do later. Um, and when I was, so my internship led to the actual graduate role. So alhamdulillah, that means in my final year I was quite relaxed. I still applied here and there, but then I could just like knuckle down with studies and just nail that, which was the ultimate thing. Because if that fell through, then I wouldn't have been able to get the graduate role, right? Because it was contingent on the grade that we got. So then I found myself at EY. I did 3 years in the sunny world of audit, or external audit. Sunny being it's probably the opposite actually. I remember very, very sort of long dark hours into the middle of the night, and no lie, like I think it was an interesting space, right? Because I kind of realized how much like I had in the reservoir as a young budding professional, like just wanting to throw myself out there. But my God, like now I look back on it and I think I worked probably the longest amount of hours at my beginning my graduate scheme. Like we have like busy seasons in audit, right? And I don't necessarily look back on them fondly, but I learned a lot. Like I think it was like it sort of rounded me off professionally, and then it also taught me that important lesson of what I don't want to do, right? So I did that for about 4 years or so, 4.5 years. So a year after the graduate scheme, a lot of colleagues just as soon as they qualify as and external roles and promotions, etc. And in my like in that 4th year was really and I thought
I think we're losing Imran a little bit.
am I back?
Yeah, you're back now. You're back now. You're back now. Apologies. So, I think it's frozen a little bit. Okay, whilst we get that sorted, inshallah, can I take the question to Brother Saif? I'm not sure if Imran's with us, but I'm going to quickly take the question to Brother Saif. Give us an example, a taster of the most difficult challenge you faced in terms of office politics at work. I think Brother Saif is muted. Let me make sure he.
Sorry.
There we go.
Sorry.
No,
Yes,
no.
I'm unmuted now. No, thank you for the question. It's a good one. If I'm honest with you, I didn't really face much politics at EY, but I actually face it more at Amazon, if I'm honest, right?
Okay.
So one of the things I can talk about is it is a US centric firm, right? So obviously the head office is in the US. So quite often there was a situation where, for example, you come up with an idea, right? And then perhaps you're trying to scale it across the team, right? But then perhaps the US team gets hold of that, and perhaps they sort of take on the idea, they take it forward, they also implement it in their region, but perhaps they take a bit of credit for it, whereas enough credit isn't shown to the person who came up with the idea, right? So I was in a couple of situations like that. I would say that was probably one of the biggest challenges I had to deal with. And like I've been promoted, alhamdulillah, twice now within Amazon, right? And one of those promotions was contingent on delivering this piece of work, right? So it was quite important to me that the credit was given where it's due, right? And I would say that's one of the main challenges, and the way I sort of navigated around that, right, was unfortunately, and maybe Kasim, you sort of touched on this a bit, right? There's an element of you have to, if you're doing a lot of hard work and just keeping it to yourself, that's not sufficient, right? There's an element of you going out there, and it is uncomfortable sometimes, right? But you do have to really highlight what you have done, right? Really highlight your work,
Bit of
sort of
marketing.
show bit of marketing, right? A bit of road showing, right? And I think perhaps it doesn't come naturally to many of us, right? But it is something I eventually learned, and it almost has become like muscle memory now, right? Like I know I have to do it, right? But you do see the value of it, right? In the initial stages, it might feel like a bit of a drag that, okay, well, why am I doing this? And obviously Islam teaches us to be humble, but at the same time, these sort of conflicting thoughts come to your mind, right? But then you're like, no, actually, you're sort of getting the credit for what you've actually done, right? It's not as if you're taking credit for something you haven't done, right? So in that particular example, what I had to do was, yeah, really make sure that my manager, the directors, and everyone pretty much in the department knew about the achievement. And I also had to effectively get my director to speak to the director of the US team, to sort of clarify some matters, right? Just to make sure that, yeah, I'll sort of leave it at that. But basically, there was a senior level conversation that had to happen, and
Yeah.
I sort of made sure that I sort of appropriately escalated it through sort of my own chain of command. Well, firstly, I had to make sure that my own chain of command was fully on board with what I had done, right? They were aware of my achievement, they knew about the impact, they knew how I was trying to scale it beyond my initial remit. Once my own chain of command were on board, then effectively I engaged them to speak to the leadership across the pond. And then, yeah, things were clarified, and alhamdulillah, that thing was sort of sorted out, right? So this is not necessarily a dini challenge, I would say. It's more of
No.
a bit of a power struggle challenge, right?
No.
Because different teams are trying to perhaps promote themselves, and that's where people need to have that awareness that no, it's not sufficient that you do a piece of work really well. You have to make sure that people give you credit for that work, and that the right people are finding out about the impact of that work, right? And
So
then yes,
how do you let people know of the work that you've done?
mm,
Do you just send an
mhm,
email out saying,
mhm.
"Hey, quick update! I just managed to do X, Y, and Z," or
No, so there are many different ways you can do it, right? The most obvious thing, and sometimes people lose sight of this, right? Because people are so busy on a day-to-day basis, they often don't document their achievements to date.
Mhm.
And because we are working in a very fast-paced environment, sometimes people even forget themselves what they have done, right? Like forget about telling
Mm,
others. People don't keep a log of all of their achievements, right? And which I think has to be like an absolute minimum. And that would be my advice to especially
mm,
people starting out in the careers, like really self audit yourself every 6 months. Think about what is the impact that you've had in the team, what new skills have you taken up, right? So that's the first step. You need to know what you've done, right? And then the second step is, yeah, your manager needs to know, right? So have frequent one-to-ones with your manager. I would say I mean, in most organizations like Amazon, there's like a weekly one-to-one, right? So use those opportunities to not just talk about the immediate work that's in front of you, but talk about, yeah, what have you achieved, right? And what were your goals? How those goals were stretch goals you set for yourself, right? And how you've progressed to those goals, right? So it's really important for your manager to have a good, rounded understanding of your
mm,
performance, right? And then sort of keep going, right? So make sure your skip level manager knows about it, right? So in my case, that would be like at a VP level, right? So have organize one-to-ones, maybe not weekly because they might not
mm.
have the time for it, but at least quarterly one-to-ones or monthly one-to-ones, right, where you are talking about it, right? So that's sort of, on a more one-to-one basis, right? But then there are also other opportunities. So let's say there's a team all hands happening, right? And most organizations have this, like maybe a monthly meeting, right? Sort of, put yourself out there, right? So reach out to the organizers and say that, look, I've delivered this, let's say, fantastic piece of work or automation. I want to just take, 5 to 10 minutes to talk about it and, talk about the lessons I've learned and how other teams
Mm,
can benefit from it, right? And that's
right.
also important. Like, you're not just keeping the achievement to yourself, you're actually trying to uplift and upskill other teams as well. Like, when you sort of show those proactive behaviors, then people know that, okay, actually, yeah, they're doing stuff, and this is how I know about it, right? And then ultimately, yeah, they're the usual, yeah, you can send an email, but a lot of the times emails do get buried, right? I mean, an
Mm,
average Amazonian probably gets 200 emails a day, so emails do get buried, and that's where it's important to sort of use these more personal interactions to sort of take it up, right? And there's a way to do it. You don't have to be like showing yourself off in the sense that in an
mm,
arrogant way. It's more like, look, I've had the privilege of working on this interesting project. I've led it to the end. These are some of the good impacts coming out. I would like to share the lessons with you, and this is how I feel other teams can benefit from this particular project, for example, right? Very easy. It will be awkward at the beginning, but the more you do it,
yeah.
more it becomes natural.
You can spin it as a contribution.
Yeah,
I guess,
exactly.
yeah, contribution, mashallah. Now, that's very, very, very powerful tip right there, mashallah. I believe we have Brother Imran back. He's looking crisp, so I think the line is strong, alhamdulillah. We'll just pick up on, you were mentioning, so about how you got to EY, but I want to push that a little bit forward and ask you, in your journey from EY, and I think you also spent some time in JP Morgan, and then I believe after that you got to the London School of London Stock Exchange, the other LSE. Can you share with us an example of a challenging situation in the context of office politics?
Yeah, sure. Let me. I had to. Funny enough, before this talk, I had to think of just a couple, and I would do the caveat, not naming names or employers. But look, I mean, one thing I've got to say is it still okay? By the way, like
Yeah, go ahead,
just the
go ahead, go ahead.
connection.
Yeah.
Cool. So one thing I was going to say is that. So you just kind of ran through my CV then. Some people are like, wow, like those are pretty major names. And, within wherever you work, whether it's a big name or a lesser known name or whatever, you're always going to find the good and the bad in terms of like, healthy working relationships and not so healthy, right? And politics does tend to straddle those spheres, right? Um, Let me think, like a good one. Well, one of the ones that I didn't manage to finish saying. So initially in my sort of early career stages, like I used to work a bit longer, and I remember one instance, right, where like we were working towards a deadline, right? So everyone's sort of super geared, and it was to the point that like we were asked to come in on weekends, and even at one point, I was in the office till no lie, like 3 a.m. 3 a.m. in the office, right, to review a piece of work basically that we'd worked on. There was a certain deadline, um, and then I can see like people like oh gosh, that doesn't sound like something I'd want to do, but like I remember the point where I realized like what is this, like what are we working on, because my manager who'd asked me to like as in like said that we need to get this done, he was knocking off, like he was like dozing off, and I was like, whoa, hang on a sec, I'm here to like get this done, so what's going on? And it's when I realized that the concept of deadlines, like when we're talking about like being authentic, like and being smart about the way you go about what you're asked to do, like really ask people like what am I required to do, when am I required to do it by, is someone going to drop dead if you're asking me to do something by end of week, and are they really going to look over it over the weekend, like as in, but what I'm trying to say here is that doesn't mean that you become lax in what you deliver. You either deliver it where reasonable and practicable, beforehand, or you query and you question the sort of, okay, who's going to get this piece of work? What's it going to achieve? And really then follow up on that. That's so important, right? Because that helps you navigate, I mean, that was one sticky situation, right? Like, as in where you're just like, and you're thinking, why am I here? What am I achieving? Everyone's burning themselves out, and that's not what you want, right? How did I navigate that? It was, first of all, I had to be exposed to it to realize that, there's this concept of, that's not what I want to be doing. That's not how I want to be working. And the worst thing is, you don't really get recognition for it. So like, if you put in your year-end appraisal, hey, I work till 3 a.m. in the office, people are going to think that's not something that you want to be talking about. So again, like, just being mindful of what you're asked to do and being like crystal clear on how to go about it. So in the context of, because people often talk about like promotion cases, right? And often like, you can get quite sticky cases where like internal promotion can be quite a bit of a ladder, or sometimes like hoops to jump through. And it's interesting hearing Qasim's stories and Saif's, because they've spent sort of extended times at some of their current employers, right? My path was slightly different. So I kind of I stayed to grow and learn where I saw the value in that, because that was the main motivator for me as well, like upskilling myself, growing. But I didn't really have an appetite for engaging with politics, particularly where I was seeing colleagues where they weren't necessarily being given promotions. I'd seen that they'd worked super hard. So there's this balance between working hard and working smart, right? Like, you often hear it, but what does it mean to work smart? And for me, it was very much like, I realized, like, after a while, that it's not just about what you do, but it's about how you do it. And a lot of organizations now, they're reviewing the way they do performance assessment, the what and the how, right? But if you look at it in a political sense, like a office politics, you need to talk up yourself, right? And I'm not huge on doing that. Like, one of the things I recognize in myself is, I'll put my head down, I'll crack on with something, and I might take one for the team, right? But I might not get the credit for it. So I'm like concerned, like, as in like keeping the house in shape and making sure everyone's like on target. But then what about my deliverable? What about my target? Or are people even aware that I'm lifting the heavy duty stuff as well? So when you start to like reframe that, and Saif mentioned like having those catch ups with your manager, but with your manager's manager as well, building that visibility. Qasim talked about having a presence with them, like being able to talk about things like, for example, football, or engage with them in that. But this is all part of making a profile that you have at work, right? And when it comes to promotion cases or internal promotion, if you go down that route, that's really important, because you need to be able to have like tangible examples that you talk to, but not only you talk to it, other people are able to say, hey, I've seen Imran do this, I've seen Qasim do this, I've seen Saif do this, like, and I can vouch for that. So you can either get it through feedback or whatnot. But I was always told this thing that feedback is one of the most important cornerstones of what we do in our work careers, because you can work super hard on a project, but if nobody acknowledges that and it's not written down, it's not going to help you in the long run, self to the ground, and you're not going to get the recognition that then contributes to a promotion case. Now, me, again, like, I was on a growth trajectory as well. Starting off in audit, I had to ask myself, do I really want to stay here? And I experimented. I tried external audit for a while. Then I moved to internal audit. And then later, I moved into risk management. And what I was doing from those moves was not only sort of searching for where I wanted to specialize, but also another way to access promotion if you're not getting it internally, or not, or you don't want to necessarily, or there may be budgetary constraints. I often find like internal promotion can be, it's not impossible at all. Like, I've been internally promoted, but sometimes it feels like there's a few more hoops to jump through. Whereas externally, moving around, you can sometimes accrue those positions if they see that actually you have the skill set we want, come in at this level, and I would also like get a healthy balance for people looking at external roles. Get the healthy balance between asking yourself, like, what is my experience? What's my skill set? It's really important when you're doing those vertical moves. and even horizontal moves into, like, if you're pivoting your career, like for me, from audit to risk. But it's really important to yourself, like, be honest, because you can present one view in an interview, like, I can do this, I can do that, and you talk up your experience. But if you talk yourself up too much and you're blowing too much hot air, and you're actually talking yourself into, some people can talk themselves into roles, because the interview isn't necessarily the best way of getting a process. But you need to be mindful that you could, like, walk into something that you need to know that you can bring your best efforts and ability and skill set to. But yeah, so just to kind of take a step back, so I've seen both, sort of, where internal promotion cases, people get them, people don't, and some people get really sour from it, and then the politics is playing out, right? For me, because I did, like, external moves, and that worked well for me, for where I wanted to put myself, what roles I wanted to achieve, and what industries I wanted to work in, I didn't see too much on the political side. So that is maybe
are you saying to me you haven't experienced any unfair treatment or any office politics in your time?
I wouldn't say that. I was giving so
give us a juicy example.
Definitely have, like,
give us a juicy,
okay,
man.
So one of the obvious ones is favoritism, right? I was talking about the context of promotion, but outside of promotion context as well. Like, so for example, if a manager likes working with a certain member of the team, and they just have an understanding, and it's one rule for them, but not a rule for the others. So I remember, like, this was pre-COVID. One of the teams I worked for, I'm not going to say who, but, like, work from home wasn't really a thing back then, right? But it was still a thing. Like, you still had the ability to do it. It just wasn't that widely practiced. Yeah, and I remember, like, so the team policy was, you let everybody know if you're working from home, or if you're, like, if you have to leave early on a particular day. That particular team, we were required to, like, contracts were like, standard 9 to 5, but there was an expectation that you'd stay till, like, 6, basically, at a minimum. And if you didn't, you'd almost have to self-justify. But there were individuals in the team that didn't adhere to that, so they didn't advise people when they work from home, or they didn't advise if they had to leave early, because they had, like, the favoritism was there, right? And you could, in one side you could call it favoritism. Another side, another way of perspective of looking at it, is they had the manager's trust, so they didn't need to, like, there's an understanding there. Or maybe there's a third perspective. Being a counselor, I did part-time counseling, I didn't mention that as well, but I look at different perspectives, right? Another perspective is that maybe I just haven't seen that they notified, or they might have notified their manager, but it does tend to play out, like, and sometimes where it's obvious, it's quite easy to call out, and you get to a point where you think, well, I either learn the rules of the game, I either learn to get in this person's good books, and I learn to navigate, and I learn to, and you have to ask yourself, is that something you want to do, where you're sort of compromising on who you want to be as a person, and and other times you just have to say, actually, that's not the environment that I want to work with. Like, I don't want to work in an environment where it's not, like, equal or fair, in terms of, like, if there's, like, I'm very big on, like, if there's a rule that we all adhere to it, and we just, like, like, go for it, like, so yeah, that's one thing. I've got a whole list of others, but, like, I know that's one maybe some people can relate to. And after,
have you given me the juiciest one?
That was one. I may be saving a few for, like, I'll pass it to the others. I'll be talking for a bit.
Think about another one. Think about a good one. I now want to come to Brother Qasim and obviously offer the same question, which is to share an example of you personally experiencing a difficult challenge with regards to office politics.
Yeah, so I alluded to earlier when I mentioned the feedback I got in my first year. Now, at that stage, I wasn't able to explain the situation. I wasn't confident, or didn't have the platform to say, look, I'm a Muslim. This isn't what I do. This isn't my place. And you're always on the periphery of the team, because whenever they have these activities, so they'd go out on these socials, they come back the next day and they're talking about war stories, with the partners. So and so did this, so and so did this, and I'm just like, I was asleep. I was in bed, prayed Isha, I went to sleep. So there's no common lived experiences, right? And the challenge is, after the first year, I was really questioning, where do I go from here? Because, and it's not just that, right? There's so many instances. They all go skiing. I was like, bro, why would you go skiing, man? Just go Dubai, innit? Like, so the lived experiences are so different. Alhamdulillah, now that the landscape is very different, and the graduate intakes that you see, the business apprentices that we hire from school, the school leavers, etc., the diversity is immense. The diversity at the junior levels is immense. But even then, even 10 years on, so I had my director panel last year, and one of the metrics that was brought up is that, when I was speaking, when I was preparing for the panel, is 28 directors and partners in our team, not the whole, just in our sub team, 28 directors and partners. How many ethnic minority individuals do you think would be there were just a guess?
Wow. 15% of that, maybe.
Just two.
Ooh.
Just two.
Okay.
So whereas the junior levels, from graduates to senior associates, so you've got a very, very big diversity. So in my panel, I was trying to explain to the partners, there's your challenge. How do you ensure that you bring these? And I said it to them. They go, how do you bring this talent for? I said, it's the common experience. So obviously, when people used to, and obviously I don't talk roadman in front of clients, but they can tell there's a bit of polish that you're applying to how you speak. And obviously at university, I learned the hard way of how to apply that polish. And then when they found out what university I went to, they said, you went to Cambridge, with that same tone, with that same tone. So you went to Cambridge. So in all of that time, you're realizing, okay, so I am the other. I am the other here. So how am I going to carve a path for myself? Because to Imran's point and Saif's point about opportunities, I wasn't getting on the right clients. I wasn't getting on any of the big projects. So how am I supposed to present myself? How am I supposed to build a profile for myself? And I kept getting seconded because they don't know who I am. So anytime there was these random common opportunities to go to the Leeds team or go to this random team, they're like, okay, you go. And I didn't volunteer, I was voluntold all of these times. So I think for the first 18 months of my career, I didn't actually do a full project with my home team. I was just seconded out. So then how do you build a profile? Being the other, being completely against the grain. How do you showcase those opportunities? How do you build out your own niche within this team as a practicing Muslim? And when people used to put meetings in for Jummah, you're like, okay, what do you do now? So you had to try and find, a lot. If it's a client meeting, try and find a Jummah in the city that you can go to and work around it. If it was Salah time in the winter, you're kind of running to and from the prayer room, saying, oh, I just need to go toilet. No, you just need to go pray Salah quickly. Maybe I should just told him I've taken up smoking and said I'm going for a quick smoke. That would have been more palatable. But these are the challenges, right? So after 12 months, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm here, and this is the feedback I've got. They've told me that I've got in my view, is I've got no place in this team. So then it's about the challenge of how do you prove it. So the biggest part is your work. Now, the quality of your work. Yes, we have to work harder. That's inevitable, and I say this straight up. I've worked very hard. The glasses cover the eye bags, put it that way. But you have to work very, very hard to get on par with the others in the same cohort, because the opportunities, you have to carve that out for yourself. So my second year and third year in the grad scheme, I worked super hard, but also I learned the art of self-advocacy. So not just working hard, but in a not arrogant way, but I take it, oh yeah, just working on this project. This was an interesting thing. So you won't believe what kind of day I had yesterday. That sort of narrative to kind of spin it in a way that doesn't come across as arrogant, saying, oh yeah, you won't believe what I did. So building that stakeholder management, putting time in with the senior people in the team, going for coffees, talking to them about what I'm doing and what I'm getting, literally the stuff that goes against our grain, because we're taught to be humble.
Be humble, yeah.
But humility, this doesn't go against the Islamic principle of humility, by the way, and that's a big challenge that we as Muslims face in the workplace. So by building that profile, it took work, it took effort, and then alhamdulillah, in my first year, they call it the ratings, I was meeting expectations, just run of the mill. Second year, I got up to higher performer, so the step above that. Then in my final year, alhamdulillah, I got to outstanding performer, and then got the opportunity to go on secondment for 2 months in New York, all expenses paid, on EY's dime. So the effort that you put in, and then the self-advocacy, the networking, that paves a path for you. And now 10 years on, it's a big difference, right? Where in my diary, Jummah is blocked. No one touches that. there's no meetings, there's no client meetings, nothing goes in. That's completely blocked. In Ramadan, they know I'm fasting, so they know that there's times when I'm going to be uncontactable. I log in after Tarawih to review stuff and send stuff out, but there's going to have to be flexibility in the system. So all of these things, they come with time, but you yourself, you are the change, because when they see how hard you're working, they're like, so this is what a Muslim is. So regardless, even if it's Ramadan, he's still putting in a shift. He still has to pray, or he goes to pray. So they see me going now. So it's not a surprise anymore. And there's other Muslims in the team. We go for Jama'at sometimes. So it's a case of, being very visible. And people know, you're going for Friday prayers. Okay, cool. Shall we go for lunch after that then? So all of these things become much more apparent and vocal. And their viewpoint of a Muslim is you. The closest, they don't look at the media. They don't look at the media anymore. They look at me. They come to me with questions. They come to me with the more challenging questions, even so, in a lot of instances. But even learning about Islam, like, what does fasting mean? What do you actually do? In terms of Hajj, in terms of the pilgrimage. So the Hajj, the big pilgrimage and the small pilgrimage. Because I went for Umrah after my first year, so obviously I came back with a shaven head. So exactly that, right? So I'm there with no hair on. They're like, what happened to you? Did you have head lice? Or talk to us. So, so those kinds of conversations, you are the starter, right? And they ask questions about halal. What does halal mean? How comes you can eat fish? Why don't we have to or what's your opinion on? They love that question. What's your opinion on shellfish? Supposedly, I don't know why someone picked up on that. But so all of these kind of conversations, that's the kind of transformational journey that you go on effectively.
So I think all three of you mentioned this notion of playing the game and understanding the rules of the game. And I think what you're talking about now is essentially understanding those rules and also working smart in terms of bringing visibility to the work that you've done, bringing being able to navigate. And that's basically the crux of today's discussion, is how do you navigate? And I think you've just given a lot of very practical tips, mashallah, on exactly how to do that. And I think I completely get what you're saying in terms of we have to work harder. And alhamdulillah, I think about, okay, if I want to eat halal food, I may have to walk a little bit longer. I might have to search a little bit harder. That's just what being a Muslim is. We will go through a little bit more difficulty, and there's no point crying about it. Let's just roll up our sleeves and get to work and really showcase what we can do, and let the work speak. Ultimately,
correct.
It doesn't matter how friendly you are. It doesn't matter how many times you've been to the pub. If your work is not good enough, it's not good enough. So
correct.
Ultimately, the work speaks. So alhamdulillah, I've been making a lot of notes here as well, by the way. So I'm jotting down all of the gems here. Alhamdulillah. Let me ask you all a question now around the notion of humility and humbleness, because is that a disadvantage for us? Especially, let's say you're a practicing Muslim, you've learned how to carry yourself with humility, and there shouldn't be any pride, there shouldn't be any ego, self-like. All of these things are actually disliked in the deen. So how does someone who wants to follow all of these things come into the workplace? Um, does that act as a disadvantage? And talk to me about this, because it's a tough question. It's a tough question that I don't think the average, the average Muslim out there may have not even thought about how to navigate this. So I'm gonna start with Brother Saif, and then Brother Imran, you can start. You can start thinking, and I'm coming to you next, inshallah.
Mhm. No, that's a very good question. And as you said, as Muslims, it often doesn't come to us naturally, right? Like we are perhaps a bit more reserved when it comes to showcasing our work and the self-advocacy piece that Qasim you're talking about, right? I mean, the way I see it, that Alhamdulillah, that let's say you are really good at something and you've delivered a big project. There's a way to reconcile that with, yes, you have done the work, but Alhamdulillah, this is actually a blessing from Allah as well, right? So it's a blessing that's coming from Allah, and effectively you are, as you are sort of doing the self-advocacy, really you are expressing gratitude in a way, right? You're saying that, I mean, perhaps we don't use it in those words, right? But the internal state that we have is the internal state that we have, that alhamdulillah, that perhaps I don't deserve this, but Allah has given me the opportunity and the blessing and the ability to complete this piece of work to a high level. And effectively, for me to sort of share that and help others upskill, that's in a way, sharing the blessing that Allah has given you, right? So I do think that's really important, because sometimes, yes, we can get carried away, especially if you're a top performer. Everyone's telling you that you're the top performer, you're on partner track or VP track or whatever. It can get to people's heads sometimes, right? And they might sort of lose sight of the fact that ultimately all of this is a blessing from Allah. And really, without His assistance and help and aid, we wouldn't be able to get to where we are, right? So I think that's at least how I tend to sort of balance it internally. Like, let's say I have a good project, I've just talked about it. I do have to sort of self reflect a bit to say, actually, no, this is a blessing from Allah. It's not purely through my ability. And that sort of helps me reconcile to say that, yes, I'm being humble, I'm assigning the success to Allah, but at the same time, that's not stopping me from sharing the results of that work, or sort of advocating for myself, right? But yeah, those are just some thoughts from my side.
Inshallah. We have a interesting comment on Instagram that being humble is actually an advantage, because speaking to your colleagues with respect and showing humility allows you to work your best without patronizing those around you, and it leads to more respect. MashaAllah.
Yes, definitely. And I think people recognize that, right? So ultimately, if and as Qasim, you were saying that there's a way you sort of do the self-advocacy, right? It's not in a very arrogant way or putting others down. Obviously, if you do that over time, that will actually work against you, because people will be like, well,
Backfire.
this person only cares about themselves and forwarding their own careers, right? But then the way you sort of approach it, if you have that sort of humble inner state, then yeah, that sort of catches on with people. People are like, no, yes, we respect this guy, we love his work, we want to hear from them what ideas that he's gonna come up with next, right? But, yeah.
Inshallah. Brother Imran, how do you showcase the amazing work that you may have done and make sure that everybody is aware? How do you go about doing that self-advocacy while
Yeah.
still maintaining humility?
Yeah, no. So I think Safe took the good one, mashallah. Like so that was but I guess so it's always an interesting one, right? Because and I hear it all the time, people saying, I hate talking about myself. There are some people that love talking about themselves, right? But in the context of humility, yeah, more often than not, people tend to say, I hate talking myself. Even when it comes to interviews, not just in the workplace, but when you're going for interview, you have to talk yourself up. You have to showcase what you've done, right? And some people just absolutely hate that, or they're internally telling themselves, "Oh, I must sound so arrogant. I must sound so pompous, like etc., right?" Um, I would say so. In order to get the balance right, so one of the useful things beyond what Saif mentioned in terms of recognizing that it's from Allah, one of the like a lot of people think like, so how can I like, yeah, like, that might seem still alien to me. Like I'm at work, where's the space for deen or my Muslim identity, or to even think about these things, right? Like as in, one of my teachers just mentioned very like very simply, like if you look at your intentions, your work can become worship, like ibadah, right? But it's an interesting distinction because you don't want to fall into the category of worshipping work, right? So we work to live, but we don't necessarily live to work, right? And you see the sort of the issues that come out of that latter type of mentality. It's not the way towards, in my opinion, like a professional excelling and whatnot. But yeah, so that's one thing. So like tweak your intention, and then you can take some benefit in that, because what you're doing is ibadah, and we should be forward and forthcoming and the best. Like Muslims should strive to be the best in what they apply themselves for, right? And we often hear a lot of things about like the golden age of Islam and whatnot, and like you look at it now, and like there's a lot of commentary on like the Muslim Ummah being in disarray and or like fragmented, and where are those, like as in like those leaders and those incredible beings? But to that comment on Instagram, like so being we have an advantage in that we have the moral character framework of Islam, which as laid out by the Prophet ﷺ, which the best of examples, like the Prophet ﷺ was a leader, achieved so much, and was the perfect epitome of humility, right? So how do you balance those things? And that's one example that it's okay to achieve, right, and to do good, and to do good for others, right? Just look at your intention. Like you're doing it for Allah, you're doing it to benefit others, you're doing your job to feed your family and to sustain yourself, all of it, like as in. So then from that side, if you're doing it well, then you can gain, you can continue to do well, so that you can continue to grow in that space. I also say that, and Saif, Qasim are great examples, like where when you do well, and when you apply yourself really well, and where your colleagues are aware of that, that's really good dawah as well, right? So like if you excel at what you do, like, hey, no, you're not saying I'm a Muslim and I'm also, this is important to me, concepts of humility, honesty, loyalty, like these are standard concepts that we have, that we look to live and exemplify. But when you are achieving professionally really well and you're able to demonstrate that, that's incredible dawah, right? So so that's to be mindful of. The third thing I'd mention is to do with the tricks of shaitan, right? So shaitan has like many ways that he can get at us, right? And one of the ways is by making us think we're doing a good thing. So, hey, don't be arrogant, be humble, put your head down in the sand, get on with your work, and don't blow your trumpet, because nobody wants to hear that, etc., etc. Now that's a trick, because shaitan doesn't want you to succeed. He doesn't want you to build your profile, to succeed in professionally or spiritually, etc. And so once you recognize that, you can sort of untangle some of those internal incorrect approaches, right? And then you can take some a healthy degree of confidence and keep attributing it back to Allah, keep reconnecting, and then you from that perspective, you can be authentic, right, when it comes to achieving at work. And one of the last things I'll say on this before I throw it back at you, Tanim, but a lot of that takes a lot of like self-introspection to be aware of what's going on for you, because you might not be able to spot like how do you navigate humility, like as in, or you might be someone that doesn't like talking up things, but really what's going on inside you, right? So I mentioned briefly one of the other spaces I take a big interest in is sort of counseling and like psychology, and it's really important, like as in when you're just not just plugged into your 9 to 5, but you're able to do things that where you feel you're able to give a bit more. So alhamdulillah, I was able to train outside of work. I'm not qualified as a counselor as well. I look at in that space. But one of the things that's really important is about knowing yourself, right? They say that you can only know God, and you can only really sort of excel when you know yourself. And it's probably a good time to mention at this point that the organization hosting this podcast, like Wiselife Academy, they're running a workshop in a couple of weeks on the concept of unleashing your potential by knowing yourself, right? Like by understanding concepts of like, what does humility really mean? What, like, as in, how can we understand what's going on for us to unleash your superpower, basically? Because these are superpowers. Like Islam's given us such incredible superpowers that through the character and example of the Prophet ﷺ, that if you tap into these and if you recognize them in yourself and you build that understanding of what's going on for yourself, you can excel incredibly, and you can reach those higher echelons of the corporate ladder, but you can be a decent individual to interact with. People enjoy interacting with you, and because we've seen people at the higher end of the corporate ladder that haven't unlocked those superpowers, right? And they're usually seen as like, I'd rather not interact with that person, or they haven't quite, there's again a lot of that politics, toxic behaviors, etc. plays out. But we've got so much and Wiselife is I've only recently started working with them, funny enough. But they so that's not really a shameless plug, but there's literally it's something that I've seen a lot of benefit in terms of taking practical knowledge, helping people just understand what's going on for themselves, and using it to practically deliver and excel. So I'd really push that, but it's in the context of knowing yourself, and so I went on a little bit, but I hope those are some useful gems there.
No, wonderful. Thank you all so much. I think I would love to take the conversation to our Q&A now. There were a few things I wanted to ask you in terms of your extracurricular activities and how you managed to fit everything. But I guess that can also be part of the Q&A. So this is an invite for everybody watching this live right now to post your questions, whether you're watching this on Instagram, on YouTube, or on LinkedIn. You now have an opportunity to ask our panelists directly anything that you would like to ask them, or to find out more about, or something in particular that piqued your interest and you want to explore that a little bit further. This is your opportunity, mashallah. Now, while everybody is typing their questions, I have a question for you all, which is, if you are supposed to work hard as a Muslim, show ihsan, and play the game in a strategic way and outperform everybody else, does it make sense to just focus on that for 10 years rather than trying to do extracurricular things outside of work as well? Because I think there's always all of us have things that we would like to be part of, whether it's counseling, whether it's helping others with CV help, whether it's helping the local masjid, whether it's just doing more stuff with your own family, your own children, your own tarbiyah. How should a young, ambitious Muslim professional think about these things, right? I really want to smash it at work. So is it okay for me to just put my head down and go all in? And is it okay for me to, maybe turn off a few of the things I used to do before? Some of the classes I used to go to, the local football session with the brothers, and, the soup kitchen I used to attend. I've got something important I need to accomplish for the sake of raising the profile of Muslims in the city. How would you, advise someone who's thinking, what shall I do? I'm going to start with Brother Saif and then come to Brother Qasim.
Should we go with Qasim first, Tanim? Because
Okay.
I don't think he had a chance to speak in the last round.
Oh, yes.
So I would love to hear from him on this one.
That's true. Go ahead. Very gentleman of you, bro.
I was about to say, or was he just throwing me under the bus because he was like, you know what, I can't.
He needs to think about it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
No. I do have an answer, but I want to hear from you.
So for me, a lot of it comes down to intention. So what am I doing this for now? And your life, you always need to revisit your situation in a scenario, because your personal and professional life will evolve as you go through, especially your personal life, right? Before I got married, I had plenty of time, free time, like I said, living at home, had the had the comfort of mum taking care of everything, alhamdulillah. So you you don't have to worry about that side of things. So you can work more and you can still do the extracurricular stuff because you have the capacity and, more importantly, the headspace. That's the other thing people tend to downplay. It's not just about time; it's about your mental capacity and how free you are mentally to deal with stuff. So it will evolve as you get married. Then obviously you have to spend more time with your wife. It is inevitable. You know, she has rights as well, and equally when you have children. So I've got two young sons.
Mashallah.
It's inevitable that at the end of the day, if I need to leave work at 5 o'clock for nursery pickup, if I need to be out the door, so my diary is blocked Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 5 p.m. I need to leave 5 o'clock. No questions asked. So then I come home, pick him up from nursery, spend some time with him, feed him dinner. Obviously, by the time my wife comes home from work with the youngest, but there's your life and your responsibilities change. But fundamentally, throughout all this is what's your intention. So with me, and as I mentioned earlier, that when I first started, I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do good. But then as I was progressing, then I realized actually there's so many avenues for which you can do good. Now, I think it was in 2016's winter, obviously there was loads of people coming to me with asking for CV help, personal statement, university, what should I do, and so on and so forth. But this was ad hoc, friends, family, people who knew me, or etc. But then I thought, let's formalize it. So we established the Young Professional Network back then. So it was a small not-for-profit based out of East London, going into schools, going into local community, going to masjids, leveraging the network that we have. So subhanAllah, when you actually look at the network that you have, there's so many people you can connect with. And you can bring the power of these individuals. And so many people, subhanAllah, were like, yeah, okay, I'm happy to volunteer my time. So you take these individuals, you take them out to schools, take them out to these doing mock interviews, whatever it might be. But because of the experience that we gained as professionals going through the system, so doing GCSEs, A levels, university, working jobs, we were able to give back to the community. So the intention is always there to do good for the ummah. And our primary aim is always to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever context. So the intention is we earn the money and use it in a halal way, and we use it for and I think success is not a bad thing. as Muslims, we shun a lot of individuals shun success. If it's pride, but being successful is not synonymous with pride. The Sahaba anhum, there's so many brilliant examples. Abdul Rahman bin Auf anhu, Uthman bin Affan anhu, super wealthy, not even rich, super wealthy, mind-blowingly wealthy, but yet still 10 of the Ashara Mubashara. So even in the context of being great businessmen, great tradesmen, etc., to your point about extracurricular, Tanim, it all comes encompassing. And the blessings and the barakah, it's all intangible. If we think about conceptually, we have 24 hours in a day. How much can we realistically fit in? But if the intention is to do good for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the barakah, the blessings, all of that comes through, and we see it, right? We see it. We know this because we see it in Ramadan. I use Ramadan as an example because Ramadan is counterintuitive. I.e., we're fasting, we're tired, we're doing extra ibadah, we're doing Tarawih Salah, we're praying more Quran, we're doing more Salah, we're doing all of this stuff, but somehow we still do everything else. We still do everything else. So the intangible asset or the intangible element of barakah we should never negate. So the intention, keeping and refreshing the intention continuously, not just when we first start our careers, but refreshing it, whether it's every 2 months, 3 months, but regularly looking and saying, okay, what am I doing this for? Does this make sense to me? Okay, and equally there might be times where you feel you're dipping a bit, so you need a bit more of a imani boost. Whether that might be going umrah, or taking up a course, or taking up a class, or even surrounding yourself with the right people. All of these elements we need to always recalibrate, refresh, and keep in mind, and build these steps and goals for ourselves, both in terms of deen and dunya.
Jazakallah khair. Wonderful advice, brother Saif. Have you had a chance to have a think?
Well, I think Qasim pretty much hit all of the right notes, right? One thing I would probably just add on to that, as you were saying, Qasim, life goes through various stages, right? What you can really apply in your 20s is not the same as you can do in your 30s, right? And I think that requires a lot of self-awareness and the ability to say no as well, right? I think that's really important because, as you said, like quite often, as a young professional, I would definitely say, yeah, those are your sort of golden years to really learn, push yourself, take up, raise your hand for every opportunity. I think, yeah, those are the really good years where you sort of set a good foundation for the rest of your career, right? But then as you sort of go into your 30s, once you have a family, yeah, priorities will shift, right? And at that stage, you have to be more mindful of how you're using your time, right? So you have to be very much, okay, well, at work I have to start working smarter, right? I need to be perhaps I need, let's say I'm not good at delegation, right? I have to say that no, I have to start delegating, otherwise I'm simply not going to have time for the rest of my pursuits, right? But also like being able to say no at that stage, right? Like an opportunity might come your way and you might say, actually, if I take up this opportunity, it's going to take away all of my weekends. So tactfully sort of being able to say no, it actually takes a lot of effort, especially, if
You're
you've
talking
been
about
working
work opportunities.
work and also outside as well, if I'm honest, right? There are like, because alhamdulillah, I'm involved with a couple of charities as a trustee. There are certain points where I had the opportunity to become trustee on other charities, right? But then I had to say that actually, no, if I spread myself too thin, I'm not going to be able to give the haq that each of these individual areas deserve, right? I won't be able to be a good employer, might not be able to operate as a good husband or a father, right? Might not be able to, spend enough time on my other charities. So at that point, I have to say, no, I think, I have enough self-awareness to say I won't be able to do all of these things. It's better for me to focus on the things that I know. But again, this could change, right? So it's not like, your life is just one constant thing. Like maybe after 10 years, once the kids are a bit older, and perhaps you're in a more senior position and you have a team under you who are doing the work, at that stage you might be able to say, actually, no, I have the capacity now. I need to do more, right? But all of this, as Qasim said, comes down to intention, like why you're doing certain things, right? And effective time management as well. I think that's, I mean, everyone learns about it, but I think it's underrated. Like really being able to manage your time effectively day in, day out makes a big difference over the course of 3 to 5 years. But yeah, I won't blabber on. Perhaps we can give it to Imran or take other questions as well.
Mashallah, I'm getting quite a few questions on LinkedIn as well now. So if that's okay, unless Brother Imran, you want to add anything onto what's been said, I want to come to you, Brother Imran, with a question from LinkedIn, which is how do you deal with bullying in the workplace?
All right. Okay, subhanallah. Bismillah. So this is an interesting one, right? So by the way, so bullying, you have to ask sort of, it can manifest in different ways, right? So it can be really obvious. It can be like a jokey thing, but jokes taken a bit too far consistently. Or it could be quite sort of, you don't realize it's bullying, right? Because you just think, oh, this is normal. I'm supposed to expect this from my seniors or my colleagues, etc. So I think the first thing is just recognize what's happening for you, right? Like that's really important. I'm really big on just like self-awareness, or if not, maybe sometimes you might want to get some advice from someone as to like what's happening, right? And again, like it's back to that concept of like knowing yourself, and there's something important about also just not knowing yourself, but knowing your boundaries, right? So what you're willing to tolerate, what you're not willing to tolerate, and when you like build an awareness of that, then you'll know that actually, hang on a sec, that wasn't quite cool what someone said. Now, whether it's about yourself, if it's directed at you, or if it's directed at a colleague, if it's directed at a colleague, you should, like tactfully be able to take them aside and say, hey, that wasn't very cool. Do you want to talk about it? Like, again, that's the counseling side of me, but anyone can do that, right? You don't have to be a trained counselor to do that. So I would say, so yeah, like that's one thing, to just build some awareness around it. Then the next thing is, what do you do about it? So again, once if a boundary has been crossed and you feel that's bullying, or it's been consistent, I don't like it, it's making me feel bad about myself, at someone else, someone's getting a laugh out of it at my expense or my colleague's expense, then you have to sort of look into the ways to go about it. And often, like most companies have like policies on this, like as in an anti-harassment policy, etc. Where you are, and they're running trainings more on this now, where you're encouraged to flag any type of like bullying or harassing behavior, right? And there are speak up policies and structures at work to support individuals with that. But the other thing, now again on the screen you can see it says office politics, right? You have to be really conscious of this, right? And this is where sometimes you have to take a bit of a realistic view as well. This isn't like, I mean, the official answer is you have the relative mechanisms to report bad behavior, but the unofficial piece as well is when you're aware of what's going on and you're aware of your circumstances, you may also be aware if something's stacked up against you, right? So there sometimes in certain organizations, certain people have been there for so long, they're part of the furniture, but it's almost unthinkable to do it any denting to that. They're just set in their ways, that's how they operate, and nobody's ever challenged them on it. And you might not be the first to be able to pull that off, right? So sometimes if you find you're up against that, you may just have to just be sensible in how you go about it. I know a friend who was engaged in a bullying case. He took it up. He went down the formal route of going down HR, and it got messy, basically. Like, and look, he had his right? Like in Islam, we also have the concept of pursuing your rights, and he went for it. He pursued it, but it got quite sticky, and sort of evidence was required, and then additional allegations were thrown back at him. That, because people get defensive when they're backed into a corner, especially if they have something to lose. So you have to ask yourself, do you want to go through that? Or at some point, and some people do, some people go all the way and they get what they were looking for, they get justice. Majority of times you could be left high and dry. And sometimes you just have to ask yourself, is this something I want to go through? Or will I sort of play the game for a while? I'll sort of play above board, like as in float, not drown. But I don't want to stay swimming forever. Like, I'm going to get out of this pool and go for another one. So you have to really ask yourself that. And bullying's a tough one. So that's just a brief snapshot into that.
Much appreciated. Much appreciated. It is sadly something that can happen and does happen often. And alhamdulillah. We have a question. Sorry, go ahead.
Just a last thing to add on that. If you do find you're either suffering from bullying or you see someone who's going through it, just even a conversation with someone that you trust, or if you're able to reach out to someone who's being bullied, that makes such a huge difference. And coming from a Muslim, it's even more so, right? Because our deen teaches that, like, we are, we're mirrors for one another, and we give sincere advice. So, yeah.
We have a question. Brother Qasim mentioned having a completely different life experiences to the colleagues that he was with. How do you build confidence to not change yourself and come with your life experience and still network with your team?
So it comes down to, I know it's the cliche, but at the end of the day, you bring a different perspective, right? Now, if everyone was homogenous in the team, you're not getting anything done because you need a varied skill set. Everyone knows, anyone who leads a team or is in that position, you need a varied skill set. If someone's very technical, fine, but you also need to make money, right? So how do you sell to clients? How do you bring business in? How do you build a team as well? Now, if you see in the team I work in at EY, they note that obviously if you have the leadership or the directors or partners in the team are, again, all homogenous, you're not really going to bring in diverse talent, because everyone's going to come in and see, okay, this is what I'm stepping into, not really my cup of tea. But if you see that diverse leadership and you think, okay, this is a team that values, gives promotions or merit based on the skill set of the individual, the output of that individual, and not based on how they look and what they say. So there is a lot to say. And look, I'm not saying, again, this is me speaking 10 years down the line. I'm not saying for a second that you come in straight away and you be talking about, chicken cottage or treating the team to doner kebab. But it takes time to be authentic to yourself. So the initial way to do that is your deen, right? Because that's the bit that for us is the most important. So when you're going for salah, be confident. Say, I'm just going for prayers. I'll be back in 5 minutes, or so on and so forth. Or, if in the case of life experiences, don't be shy to share your life experiences. that's the other thing. Subhanallah, like now my team all know I'm from Ilford. And obviously it's got its own reputation, subhanallah. But at the end of the day, what else do you bring to the table, right? You bring exactly. You showcase that, look, the life has not been that easy. And then equally, you have individuals who get hired from different backgrounds, from international students who are it's not easy for them because their families are away, they go through their own struggles. You've got people from ethnic minorities who themselves have come from different backgrounds in from various challenging background. So when they see someone in that capacity, then it makes a big difference, right? So slowly but surely, it's a case, and I'm not saying you go in gung ho straight away, right, on day one, but it's about slowly, just being confident in yourself to be able to bring that to the fore, and equally. When they're talking about stuff, so again, skiing keeps coming up, right? Because that's all they do. So you feel quite you feel quite ostracized because you're like, well, why are these guys going skiing? Why would anyone willingly go to this kind of environment? And it's all cold and stuff like that. Just go, go to Turkey, go to Istanbul. But and there's no halal food there either. What am I going to eat? Just chips all day, subhanallah. But at the end of the day, it's about not being despondent and bringing your own experiences. So if you go home to Pakistan, to India, to Bangladesh, talk about these things. Bring in. So for Eid, when Eid just went past, we brought in mitai, we brought in samosas, we brought in pakoras, we brought in stuff to celebrate. So this is what we do. In our culture, this is what we do, and in our deen, this is how we celebrate. So there's elements, and one of the team she brought in an Eid Mubarak banner, so to show that, look, this is who we are. We're not just stoic individuals who just pray all the time and just in the mosque all the time. We have our enjoyment according to our deen. So there is that same point about bringing your true authentic self to work. There's elements of it. Like I remember how many times I used to bring in mumsy's cooking for lunch, leftovers. And initially I was a bit hesitant because I was like, they're gonna be like, he's bringing stinky food in again. But every time I used to eat, what you got there? What you got there? And initially, I'll end on this. A lot of the time, the largest barriers that we put in front are those that we put ourselves. Yes, there are other barriers, but a lot of the time, the most significant barriers are what we put in our head and how we think people are going to perceive us. But subhanallah, it's not always the case.
Wonderful answer. Thank you so much for that. I'm conscious you guys need to get home, but I want to take one final question, and this is from Brother Ali Isa. And I'd like to pose this question to Brother Saif. How would you suggest presenting yourself as a practicing Muslim in a way that isn't performative? Because there's always the risk of being seen as less committed. Because I have my faith, I have my restrictions, I have my priorities. How do we navigate that part? And I remember falling in that trap.
No, it's a very good question, and it's wonderful to hear from you, Ali. I'll try to keep it brief and short, maybe using a quick example, right? I remember when I was doing a secondment at a client, I was a bit worried about how to approach the topic of Jumu'ah, right? And we were actually charging this client on an hourly basis, right? So there is an element of them in my head, and again, Qasim, I fully echo your thoughts, right? Sometimes the barrier is in our minds, right? But once you open the conversation, you'll see that it actually becomes quite organic and it flows naturally. So in this particular case, from the very first day, I basically said that, look, I need to attend Friday prayers, but what I'll do is I'll make sure to make up those hours and make sure that you as a client are not charged for those hours, right? And I sort of made that as part of a very friendly conversation, right? And that really set the scene to say, okay, well, actually, yes, he can't attend meetings on Fridays. He needs to set this time out. But I also know he's not skimping. He's actually going to make up those, let's say, couple of hours to and deliver the work on time, right? And you'll find that as long as you're, and going back to the previous point, as long as you're doing ihsan in your work and you're delivering work on time, honestly, most people are willing to be very, very flexible, right? So they and let's say you can't attend a certain event because it involves alcohol, right? You can almost arrange a separate sort of lunch session, right? Or maybe be proactive to arrange a team social. And there are ways you can sort of make up for that, right? And that way people still feel like, okay, yes, he is a Muslim, he has boundaries, but he's still very much part of the team. He cares about the team, and he is a good contributor to the team, right? Yeah, there's a certain way to do it, but again, I don't have the time to sort of go into a few more examples. Hope
No,
that helps, Ali.
it basically sounds like you let them know that you have certain boundaries or certain needs, but at the same time, let them know I'm also very committed to.
And just
Exactly.
to briefly,
They can't
just
question
to
your work, right?
briefly add there.
Go ahead, Imran.
Yeah, no. I was just, it's an amazing point from Saif, and I think that can literally answer so many challenges that a Muslim faces in the workplace, around prayer, around Jummah, around fasting, etc. Where if you manage it professionally, like manage your schedule professionally, manage your deliverables professionally, plan around your salah, like a namaz or whatever, like as in. And if you let people know in advance that, hey, I have to do Friday prayer this time, or I'm fasting, can I sort of come in possibly a bit later, but I'll make up the hours later. Like you keep it professional, right? You keep the confidence in your delivery, and then the concept of is he really committed, it goes out of the window, because you say, hey, I need this break, but I'm gonna make it up here, or you keep them up to date with your deliverables. And here's a good thing to round that piece off. Is another thing is, don't come with problems, but come with solutions. You hear that a lot in the Muslim, and I think one of the questions I saw was like, can you give advice from a Muslim perspective, non-Muslim perspective? We are people of that sort of mindset as well, right? Like as in, and people appreciate when if you can't do something, or if you can't attend a particular social whatever, give an alternative and just see where it goes. Or and that is really huge, and it's all part of the context of that it's rooted in, a lot of this is the golden Islamic advice I always go to is the concept of tying your camel, right? So have your faith in Allah, but do your bit. And then the way you navigate that through office politics is you can only do your bit. So make sure you do it. Don't just forget about doing your bit and just only rely on Allah. Rely on Allah, do your bit, and then trust Allah with the outcome. Because sometimes we get too attached to outcome, whether it's we didn't get an interview, or we got done over on a promotion, or etc., etc. But just trust that Allah has and knows and plans better than anyone else can, right? But if you put your bits in place, you've done your best, and you relied on Allah, and you're covered.
Alhamdulillah, what a beautiful way to wrap up this conversation. Fascinating conversation, so many gems, so many practical tips and strategies. This should be like corporate Muslim corporate training, mandatory training for everyone. Alhamdulillah, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all three of you to give us an hour and a half of your time after work. You probably still have to travel back to your families. So really, 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 really appreciate him. Allah bless you, and continue to be an example for others to learn from and benefit from, inshallah. I would like to, before wrapping up, to remind everybody that we have a live workshop in a couple of weeks' time from now, which is all about unleashing your superpower and really discovering your purpose and aligning your strengths to that purpose to really become a force to be reckoned with, inshallah. The link will be it has been shared everywhere on all the platforms. So if you're in London or in the UK and you want to experience a life-changing workshop, I highly recommend it. I've been to this workshop myself as well, alhamdulillah. We will wrap up here. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for the esteemed panelists for giving us their precious time and words of wisdom from their experience. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك. And brothers, if you have anybody watching, if you have more questions, send them my way, and I will put you in touch with these legends. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.